Hi, Stacy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Very excited to be here with you both.
Well, we are excited to
Me
have
too.
you on the show today. This is a hot topic, no pun intended. So, thanks for taking the time out to be with us today. We'll just kick it off real quick by asking you about Gennev. You and your team at Gennev help women in menopause with nutrition, lifestyle changes, and we get so many questions here at Medovia and what women should eat, how much exercise should they be doing, what types of exercise, what types of supplements should they be taking. So, can you just dive in here and before we get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I am a registered dietitian and exercise physiologist. My background, career-wise, the exercise piece is certainly a passion. I love the mesh of nutrition science and exercise, and have worked in collegiate athletics. I have a specialty certification in sports dietetics. I've also worked in academia and still hold an adjunct position at Oregon State University, teaching both nutrition and exercise science classes, and have worked even in more of the health and wellness realm with genetics and more of the personalized medicine approach now that's up and coming for another startup that was in Seattle. Fortunately, we didn't make it, but it was a great opportunity to have all this data of biometric data of individuals. But one of the things I learned in that process was that even when you have a lot of data, and data, certainly we live in a data centered world now, right? There's certain importance to it. However, when it comes down to actually changing behaviors, it's less about the data and more about the individual and their motivation.
Mhm.
And so with Gennev, which is where I've been for the last 4 years working, we are able to really support the patient population in peri and post menopause, which I've come to learn and really appreciate. This part of women's health are very, I don't have to tell all of you and probably your listeners, but an area of much needed attention, and bringing that behavior change piece, the health coaching piece, in addition to the physiology lens and nutrition education and training that I have.
Yeah, that's
That's
great.
yeah.
Can you back up just
Mhm.
just rewind here a little bit for those of our listeners that are not familiar with Gennev? Can you just give a brief overview of what who Gennev is and what you do beyond what you just mentioned?
Yeah, so Geneva is a virtual clinic focusing on peri and postmenopausal patients. And we offer gynecological care with physicians that can provide everything from hormone therapy to education to assessment, really anything besides physical exams, right? Where we currently still have a little bit of a limitation with telemedicine. And so there's certainly some of those, but really a lot of what the menopause journey and the symptoms can be treated through telemedicine. And my team and we are all registered dietitians, and we collaborate with the physicians to be able to provide that lifestyle arm of nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management for symptom management in collaboration with any type of medical intervention. And then around that, Gennev also provides education. We do have a shop with some products supportive of women's health and menopause, and really just looking to bring the care and attention that this patient population deserves. In a convenient way, an accessible way through telemedicine, and also working. We are in network with with Aetna and United Healthcare, and looking to expand our payers so we can provide this access to more people.
I love that work that you're doing. It's fun to watch you grow and see the progress. So when you're talking to women, what are their best dietary strategies for women going through menopause, and how do you help them with their symptoms in a dietary way?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, that go
we
ahead.
know that, just exercising as hard as you possibly can and food elimination is not something that helps. But what
Mhm.
does help? What are some good strategies?
I like how you brought that up, Kim, in terms of what doesn't help, because I think that often, if we look at the narrative around what so many of us have been taught and heard when our bodies are changing, and what can we do to fix it, often the default is to work harder and whether it's working harder at exercise or working harder at their diet, and that results in more of a restriction or a scarcity mindset. And we really try to bring more of that abundance mindset. Let's look at nourishing and working with your changing physiology. Let's support your body through this time and find ways to do that with nutrition, with movement, and other strategies we can talk about. But specifically on the nutrition side of things, if I think when we have to, it's helpful to have some things to focus on. Oftentimes, patients will say, "All right, calorie counting. Let's talk. Tell me about calorie counting." And my response to that is, we don't really know exactly how many calories you need in this given moment. So me giving you a calorie range even is an educated ballpark. Yes, with my training and experience, I could probably get pretty close, but I don't know exactly. And so asking you to track calories and compare, it could be a futile effort and could become really frustrating. And we don't need to add frustrations to a already
Yeah.
challenging time
Sure.
of life.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I understand where focus points can be helpful. And so that's where we at Gennev, we usually focus on fiber and protein, nutrients that are ones that we may already not be getting enough of, and often or in the peri and postmenopausal transition have reason to increase. So, for example, protein needs increase with aging. They actually increase for aging with everyone, but one of the things we know with the perimenopause transition is that with that decrease in estrogen, there's less of a signal to the muscle to rebuild and repair. So when you take something away in this physiological change, what we want to be thinking about is what's the other lever we can pull on? Where can we get something similar? It's never going to be exact the effect of estrogen, but another thing that helps with muscle protein synthesis or rebuilding, repairing muscle is to have a more protein that stimulates it. So that's where increasing protein can be helpful. And I will often start with just having patients recognize where they are having protein in their meals, what sources those come from, whether it's plant based or animal based, and just increasing the portion a little bit, see how that feels, and go from there and see what they notice. On the fiber side of things, fiber coming from our fruits, our vegetables, anything that's a plant that grows contains fibers, your whole grains, beans, lentils. I don't think it's a secret that eating more plants is helpful. And so I think, but it's figuring out how to do that in a way that aligns with your lifestyle and a way that is accessible to the individuals that you're working with. So we tend to really try to personalize that plan. The fiber piece is helpful for supporting the health of the gut microbiome. It's also supportive for helping to support heart health and reduce LDL cholesterol specifically. And then there's also benefits in terms of just satiety and feeling satisfied with your meals. And that can also help with overall portion control.
In the health coach field, we talk about crowding out the bad
Mm,
foods with the good foods,
mhm.
right? Do you have any kind of top favorite choices in both those categories that are
Mm,
easy to add to your diet if you're like, okay, I eat chicken, but what else? Like
right.
any like super easy ways that you can take it on the run or
Yeah.
whatever that would help
Throw it
people?
in, right?
Yeah.
Throw it in
Yep.
quick. Yeah.
Yeah. So for on the animal protein side of things, always a big, and I like when we can get more out of the food, right? Like I call it optimizing the bite. So we can make sure we're getting other nutrients there. So your fish, especially your salmon, is a great way to also get omega-3s, some anti-inflammatory nutrients, and the protein. And I'm a fan of, if for convenience, canned salmon. Now, some people may not prefer the canned option for salmon, but that can be a great option. You can also get, I was talking to a patient today, she found salmon bird burgers at Trader Joe's, so they're
Oh,
frozen
yeah.
patties.
Mhm.
You put them in the microwave or in the oven, and then put them on a bed of greens, or add them to a whole grain bun and add some veggies there. Can be a great, easy way to do that. On the plant side, and again, thinking about double dipping a little bit, your beans, your lentils,
Mhm.
canned beans. Thinking of Trader Joe's again, they also have cooked lentils in the refrigerator section. Open up the vacuum sealed bag, put those on a salad. Those are some great ways. That's also going to get you the fiber piece
Mhm.
on that. Oatmeal is another one on the fiber side of things. Definitely want to combine it with some nuts or a protein source, but really great way to get soluble fiber, which specifically binds that LDL cholesterol and helps to excrete it out of the body.
You make a good point about adding some protein to the oatmeal, because I noticed a spike in my blood sugar when I
Mm,
didn't add enough protein. What
mhm,
about seeds? I hear a lot about chia and flax, and you name the seed that helps women through menopause, not only
mhm.
with the fiber and the gut issues, but like with the protein and that. What are your thoughts on that?
I like the seed option because you can add it's versatile. You can add it to smoothies. Sometimes you can add it to salads. Depends. Seeds in a fork don't always go well because they fall through. So we got to think about the logistics of it. But where I like there is it doesn't take a lot to have a benefit. So your chia seeds are definitely going to be a great fiber source. Certainly something that can help support digestion, which can sometimes change in with the hormonal changes and shifts that happen. The flaxseed gets it some attention in terms of the potential to impact menopause symptoms, specifically hot flashes. Um, I see mixed results with that. I have one patient who's been pretty dedicated to using flax on a regular basis and has seen uh, a reduction in symptoms or a slight improvement, but nothing that's been so measurable. Like, this is amazing. Like,
Yeah,
adding flax has
Mhm.
just
the
been the
magic
thing.
pill.
Yeah, the magic
Yeah,
pill.
yeah.
Mhm.
But there are other benefits. Again, there's going to be the protein and the omega-3 fatty acids. So you're getting, I think about it again, we're providing the body with a variety of nutrients with those. So I think seeds can be a great way to do that. And it doesn't take that much to be able to get the benefit from it.
Good to know.
That's great. Stacey, we also get a lot of questions from women about weight gain during
Hmm.
the menopause years, and I'm sure you do as well. And I'm just curious if we can touch on that for just a moment, and
Hmm.
how might someone manage their weight or body composition? What are
Hmm.
things that they can do to help with that? And we're big believers over here at Medovia, healthy at any weight, right? It's
Yep.
not about what the scale says, but
Hmm.
being healthy overall. But I know
Hmm.
that a lot of women struggle in this area.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, right? It's there's so many nuances. And what I want to respect as well before we dive into this, because definitely, having worked in athletics and, been a part of health and nutrition fields for, um, even before becoming a dietitian. So I think I'm pushing 20 years now, just being involved in all that. What I want to start off with is just respecting that one, being in a body in this world is hard. Being in a changing body when it feels outside of your control is really hard. Add being a woman identifying as a woman on top of that, we have another layer, although I don't want to exclude men. Men
Mm,
certainly struggle with body changes as well in our culture. Um, and so and I also want to recognize that, as someone who has existed in what would be classified as a thin body, I don't always have the same perspective as someone that might be in a larger body and some of the, or I don't have the experience that they have. Their life experience is different than the privilege I may have, just due to my body size. So I always want to kind of put that as a respect for this, because all of that is really hard when it comes to changing bodies. Um, and so that lens, we also want to recognize this period of time where we see a change in physiology often does have shifts in body size and shape for pretty much the majority of individuals going through this. Some individuals will go through peri into postmenopause and not notice a shift or a change at all. But I would say that is the minority.
mhm,
Um, and so from a physiological standpoint, I always think, okay, if this is happening, maybe there's a reason why. And there is some research to suggest that some amount of weight gain is protective during this time. And so there's something there. I don't think we've explored or understood it all, but there is something there. And then there are scenarios too where someone in a larger body may have other metabolic concerns where lifestyle habits, like nutrition and exercise, stress, sleep management, sleep support, can be helpful to improving their metabolic profile. And then to your point, April, with or without weight loss. And so we try to focus on that as much as possible at Gennev of let's help you to improve that health outcome. If health is really the goal, let's look at some other metrics besides the number on the scale alone. While at the same time respecting that sometimes the number on the scale means a lot to people.
Mhm.
And so we have to work within that realm as well, where that's coming from, what that means. My experience has been, even if someone comes in with a goal around weight loss, and which is valid and their own, and we respect that autonomy. When they implement habits that they've either improved their nutrition, and often that's actually eating more, eating more food,
Right.
nourishing your body.
Mhm.
Um, and finding movement that feels good in their body, that they want to do, that they look forward to, and rather this mindset of, "Ugh, I have to go exercise, it's I get to move my body today," they start to feel better in their body, and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
feel better."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then we're able to see a little bit of a shift and a benefit there. So, long answer because it's so
It's
complicated and
great. Yeah.
so nuanced. And then coming back to some of even the strategies that we've talked about to improve overall metabolic health, protein and fiber can definitely do that. Certain types of exercise, I always start with, what is your current fitness level and exercise experience? And then how can we level that up, and continue to build on it? Right now, if we want to, isolate research and what we're finding, certainly resistance training, heavier weights, lower repetitions, high intensity exercise tends to get more greater bang for your buck
Mhm.
during this physiological transition of peri to postmenopause. Um, and we always have to take the individual into account. I have some patients that are like, "No, I don't want to be in a gym. I'm not
Yeah.
doing it." And you're like, "Well, okay, like there's
Yeah.
other ways to move."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots
um,
of other ways to move, right?
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not that cut and dry, but certainly there are some benefits. The one thing I will say that I think any individual can think about, especially during this time, is that you may have to work a little bit harder at challenging yourself. So when you notice, and this is a catch 22, when you notice you've been doing an exercise program and your fitness has improved, which is like high five, way to go. Um, and then you got to go up a little bit more. You got to try, you got to like go a little
Keep
faster,
pushing
try a
yourself,
hill.
right?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Because now you're able to.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes it could be easy to be like, well, this is just the routine. This is the walk I do. This is the time I do. This is the weight I lift. Do you still want to see the benefits? You do have to increase the intensity.
Yeah,
That
really
makes
good
sense.
point.
Mhm.
So beyond diet and exercise, what are some other sort of complementary things people should think about, changes that they need to look at for their overall well-being, from a lifestyle perspective that would help them during this time?
I think the first one I'm gonna say, you're both are gonna I'm gonna like make a prediction that you're both are gonna jump onto this, but with your health coaching backgrounds, but we need to do a better job at setting boundaries. And that doesn't mean, I think some people are like, that means I'm gonna have to like tell people no and time block and like do all of these things. I think sometimes it can just be uh just I need a pause right now, right? I need to take some time.
Mhm.
I will come back to this. Just giving that permission to give space,
Yeah.
as well as looking at sometimes it's counterintuitive to, and I don't always like the airplane mask analogy, but it's counterintuitive. It if we've always been giving to other people, and some people are rewarded by that. Some people, that's who they are, that's their nature, they're givers. And so you don't want to take that away from them if that's something that they value. But at the same time, there's this shift that happens here when all of a sudden you may need more of that energy and attention. And so often when people are able to then give that to themselves, whether it's a deep breath, whether it's time to themselves, whether it's a walk in the morning or meditation time in the morning, then all of a sudden it's like it opens up these possibilities. Like,
Yeah.
oh, planning feels a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
I just found some time to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
So I want to say it's almost like magic, but it's kind of,
Wish it were
um,
magic, right?
yep.
We call that radical self-care.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
boundaries, radical self-care. Someone just asked us on Monday night in one of our sessions about self-care, and I don't have time for myself. And people
Mm,
keep talking about self-care, 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 but I don't have time for that. And it comes back to what you just said, Stacey. Sometimes it's just a pause
mhm,
and just breathing. Just
mhm.
let it out and take a deep breath. Sometimes it's a 5-minute meditation, right? It doesn't have to be this gigantic mountain that you have to climb,
Yeah.
or 3 hours or a full weekend retreat, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
We
we
don't like
all wanna go we all wanna go to the spa more,
Yeah,
but,
I
we
like,
know.
all want
that's
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that may
Start
not always
small.
work. Yeah.
And our listeners didn't see us, but yes, Kim and I both were shaking our heads
Yeah,
and
yeah.
nodding our heads. Yes,
That's good.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So we completely agree with you there.
Well, and we're often asked like detailed questions like, okay, supplements. You say I should be
Mm.
taking some supplements and specific nutrients, and you mentioned protein and fiber, but are there other kinds of supplements that women should incorporate into their diet and routine right now that you have found that helps women during this time?
Yeah, I think there are some that can be helpful, and I always, um we have a food first approach at Gennev. Like, you're always going to get more bang for your buck out of food than you would a supplement alone. However, I do get where supplements can be convenient, they can be helpful, and definitely in areas are very purposeful in filling some gaps. So the ones that can be specifically helpful during the peri to postmenopausal transition, vitamin D is often one, especially we're all in the Pacific Northwest. We know our sunlight exposure is minimal, although it's getting days are getting longer. Um,
Yeah.
but so that one is one because of the bone health piece of it, especially there's also receptors in the muscle for vitamin D. And so we just talked about the importance of being able to support muscle, increasing research even on brain health and vitamin D. So we want to be supporting some of these components. I always recommend if you can get a vitamin D lab drawn, then you know what approximate range you should be supplementing with, or if you need to supplement. Some people don't need to. And then along those lines, an omega-3 supplement. I know I mentioned the salmon as a great
Yeah.
way to get omega-3 source. If you don't eat fish, certainly, and you can do plant-based omega-3 supplements. But then most people aren't eating fish 2 to 3 times per week, which would
Right.
be about what you need to meet the omega-3. And the plant-based sources of omega-3s, while certainly beneficial, don't have the same potency
Yeah.
as fish-based sources. And that omega-3 can certainly help with brain health, with inflammation, vascular health of the blood vessels. So there's a lot of benefits to the omega-3. And then the other one is magnesium. That one, couple of places it can be helpful with peri and postmenopause is digestion, which can change during this shift, as well as magnesium glycinate can also help with, I call it like turning down the volume of the brain a little bit, so it
Mhm.
can have a little bit of a calming effect, and just provides a lot, and also with muscle and bone plays a role. So it's kind of a heavy hitter in that way. So those are typically the three that I would mention to patients consider if they aren't already taking them.
Great. Thank
You
you.
mentioned vitamin D for bone health, and I'm wondering how we can support bone health additionally with dietary needs,
Mhm.
right? How can we do that and prevent osteoporosis? Because we know that that's a challenge in postmenopause.
Yeah. So the first thing, certainly, calcium gets a lot of credit. It's really important for bones. It does make up the majority of bones. It does need the vitamin D to be incorporated into the bone, and then other nutrients around that. And calcium from a food standpoint. Yes, dairy is a convenient source. It doesn't have to be the only source. And so you certainly can get calcium. A lot of dairy alternatives are fortified with calcium. And then you can get calcium in a lot of plants because it's in soil. So any plants will have some level of calcium in them. The hard part with some of those sources of calcium is that there are also um, components to plants that bind the calcium. So the amount that you'll absorb will be a little bit less than, say,
Mm.
a glass of milk. Tofu has calcium in it, so there's some other sources as well in there. And then the other part, though, is there's also a need to make sure you're balancing other bone supporting nutrients. So protein will be one of those, vitamin K, which can be found in leafy greens, the magnesium, like we talked about, as well as protein, think those are all in vitamin D, can be the ones that they all come together to play a role in overall bone health. So that's another thing to, again, thinking big picture. The other piece on the bone health is you have to be getting enough calories.
Mm.
So that's where significant calorie deficits can compromise bone health as well. So again, you want to make sure that the nutrients are available as well as the calories.
Mhm. That makes sense. And does movement have a place to play with bone health and osteoporosis as well?
It does, and multi purposes. So we think of weight bearing exercise. Absolutely, weight bearing does provide a stimulus to the bone. So then that prompts the bone to rebuild and repair. Um, the thing to keep in mind with weight bearing exercise, coming back to similarly to be able to see increases in fitness, you have to continue to challenge the bone itself. You also have to do that if you want to increase the bone density. So a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I do weight bearing exercise. I walk every day." Well, this is an example where unless you're gaining weight every day, which no one in perimenopause wants to do, um, you're not continuing to stimulate your bone, and your body becomes very efficient. So you still could be getting cardiovascular benefits, and walking is definitely a great movement choice, but you're not going to still get the same bone benefit. So there's been we're seeing an increase now in weighted vests use. That's a way to add the stress to your bone. You want to be you still want to be mindful of that. It's adding more weight can make balance a little bit more of a challenge. Sometimes you start to add weight to your upper body and your posture changes and injuries happen. So you want to be mindful of all those things. But that can be a way to add to walking. That's where you're going to get, though, if you are doing resistance training and increasing that weight, large muscle group exercises, your squats, your deadlifts, your lunges are really great for increasing and maintaining bone density of the hips and the legs. And that's the hip and the spine are one of the primary osteoporotic fracture sites. And then the other piece on exercise, where walking, I would say, does support decreasing risk of fracture, is that we do see individuals that are just generally more active tend to have a less risk of falling.
Mm.
And it's really the falls. I always remind people that, well, of course, you don't want to have osteopenia or osteoporosis, but it's not like cancer. Like it progresses, but you can walk around with that. And as long as you don't fall, you could still live a healthy life. So of course you want to optimize your bone health and decrease that. But if you can also prevent falling through regular exercise and movement and balance training, and that's where, if you're walking regularly, that can be a great way to decrease that risk of falling.
Yeah, that's great because it's the fall that typically we see the spiral effect, right? We
Yep.
we just we don't want that. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Well, Stacey, is there anything else that we haven't asked you that you would like our audience to leave with today?
I think one thing to think about during this phase, I mean, one, just like you are all doing, let's talk about this stuff. Let's talk about the celebrations. Let's talk about the hard. Um, let's I don't know, normalize it. It's starting to feel like, well, then it just gets pushed under, like it's just normal, no big deal. So I don't know if that's the right word, but let's just be vocal about what's happening here and be honest around it. Sometimes that requires vulnerability, and also helping people not to suffer through. Like we have this like go get them, like let's just go. And like I said, like I'm an athlete at heart, right? Like there's times where I'm like, okay, go hard or go home, but menopause isn't one of them. Like our chief medical officer always says, like there's no like award if you get there without support, like
Mhm.
to the other side. So let's help each other. Let's offer options. Let's keep pushing the needle on research and learning more. We're just scratching the surface, and it's going to take everybody in this field. We need to come together and recognize. And I've come to, I think 4 years ago, I was like, all right, I'm going to be a part of changing the menopause experience for everyone. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. And I'm also recognizing there are days where I'm like, oh my gosh, we still have so much to go. So I
Yeah.
try to just shift that focus of like, okay, can we make it better for the next person? Like,
Mhm.
can we just do our part? So then the next generation can do theirs, but have it a little bit easier, a little bit different.
We
Yeah.
talk about doing better for our daughters every day,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
Yep.
And well, thank you for all the great information. Now, as we said before we went on air, we like to do a lightning round.
Cool.
So are you ready?
I'm ready for this. I
All
hear
right.
this on podcasts all the time. I'm like, I always wait for this.
Oh, good.
Oh, yay. Okay. Do you like sweet or salty?
Oh, sweet.
Summer or winter?
Ooh, summer.
Cardio or yoga?
Cardio.
I thought you'd say that.
Cardio. I was going to ask walk or run. Is it still the run, the
It's still
cardio?
still the run. Yeah.
All right, perfect. And then the last question that we always ask is, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received, or
Mm.
a piece of advice that you'd like to leave the listeners?
This one can go in different directions, and I think it stems my passion for learning. My grandmother used to always say, and my grandmother, she made it to over 100 years, and ice cream and chocolate were like her favorite things. So I'm like
Amen.
following that lead.
Yeah.
Um, But she always talked about education is like one things in our lives no one can take away from you. And
Mm,
so you're the passion for learning, but I think that also stems to other things we can do, as we think about this field of women's health. The what we give to it is something that no one can ever take away. And so when we put that work in, there's something to that. We can all do our part.
mhm.
And maybe it only makes a dent, but I think it's a dent no one can then take away from you.
Yeah.
And so it kind of stems into that as well.
Love your grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love you, Grandma. My grandma was a screwdriver. That's good too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
no, I love that. You're right. Education is empowering and you can't
Yeah.
take it away. So
Yep.
thank you for that. And all of the information that you shared with us today and our listeners, I know that it's going to be extremely helpful for them. So thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Absolutely.
And listeners, that's a wrap. So until we meet again, go find joy in the journey.
Thanks,
Love it.
Stacy. Take
Thank
care.
you both.
Care.
Bye.